Hey, this is Joe, Great Bench Electronics. Welcome back to the pedal teardown series where I take apart new and interesting pedals and show you what's going on inside. Today we have the Earthquaker Life Pedal version 2. Earthquaker Life Pedal. This is version 2. Version 1 was in a folded steel angular enclosure, had the knobs top mounted. This is just in a standard 1590 BB enclosure. As many people know, Life Pedal is a series of 3 pedals mashed into one. So we have an analog octave up pedal like a green ringer, Proco Rat, and then a Mosfet Boost like an SHO at the end. To that effect, we have 2 foot switches here, labeled amplitude on the right, magnitude on the left. Amplitude turns on the Proco Rat circuit, which always has the octave along with it. You can dial in the amount of octave you want with this potentiometer. You also have an expression jack here where you can put in a foot switch, and that will take over this control, so you can, with a foot pedal, dial in how much octave you want. Proco Rat controls are across the top, so amplitude is volume, filter is filter, which is like a reverse tone control, and distortion is distortion. Magnitude over here on the left, this button engages the boost at the end of the circuit, and the amount of boost is here controlled with this control called magnitude. In the middle here we have our clipping options. So this is the part of the Proco Rat circuit, the hard clipping diodes to ground at the end of the Proco Rat circuit. On the left here is op amp, which means no clipping diodes, so the only distortion you're going to get is from clipping the op amp itself. In the middle here is asymmetric clipping, so that's going to be one-way diodes are going to have a higher forward voltage than the other way, so that's going to give asymmetric clipping. And then symmetric is like the standard Proco Rat circuit, symmetric clipping diodes, just opposite polarity. On the top we've got the 1/4 inch input and output jacks, standard 2.1 millimeter 9 volt DC input jack. On the back here, Earthquaker devices, serial number, handmade in Akron, Ohio. So that covers the externals. Let's crack this pedal open. All right, so here is the inside of the Earthquaker Life Pedal. Usually I take the PCB fully out of the enclosure so we can inspect the opposite side of the PCB. Unfortunately, in this case, the way the jacks are mounted here with the 90-degree angle here, the board is absolutely wedged inside this enclosure to the point where when they're installing, you can see here, hopefully, that actually some of the paint was scraping off during the insertion of the PCB. Seeing as how this is a pretty valuable pedal, I am not going to risk damaging the PCB or the jacks in order to get it out. Luckily, the PCB is mounted with the components up, so we can see everything that's important even without taking it out of the enclosure. So exactly what we would expect, which is sort of 3 pedals in one, and they're sort of sectioned off here. In this section here, we have our Proco Rat. That includes our little 8-pin dip package. That is, there you go, it's an LM308N. Manufacturer is National Semiconductor. In this section here, we have a bit of stuff for power and filtering, and also to get the relay switching working. But also we have our green ringer here. That's going to be these 2 transistors here, this transistor here, and these 2 matched germanium diodes. We'll look at those in a second. Over here is our Mosfet, and a Mosfet Boost is just going to be these components in here. Expression pedal. This pedal does use some tantalum capacitors, as the original Rats did. We have our clipping diode selection here. That's this bank of diodes and little LED here. One bank of these is going to be the symmetric clipping. These 2 diodes and the LED is going to be the asymmetric. And then op amp is none of them in circuit. These are the relays for the switching. The foot switches are non-latching, so they're just a click to make contact and let go. So that's otherwise normally open. And all they do is trigger a voltage in the relay that causes the relay to close or open, which changes where the input and output jacks are routed. If they're engaging a switch, then they're going into the circuit and then back out. If they're not, then they're just connecting the input straight to output for true bypass. A couple of ICs going on in here, most likely having to do with that relay switching. Got a little TO92 transistor in there. It's actually a positive 5 volt voltage regulator, a 78L05. The switches here are branded SCI. I'm not familiar with that brand, but they feel very similar to the Carling switches we know and love. PCB mounted DC jack, that's cool. We also have a little grounding tab over here. It's a little spring grounding tab. I like that a lot. Very dependable ground there. And you can see they masked off the enclosure when they were painting it to make sure you have a good solid ground connection. Neutrik stereo switching jacks. Capacitors are generally these Panasonic maroon colored, at least that style capacitors. Little gold capacitors are Nichicon, and like I said, tantalums in the Rat circuit. All the resistors are 1/8 watt, which is totally fine. As I said in other videos, 1/8 watts more than enough for guitar pedals. Okay, so let's do a forward voltage test on these Germanium diodes. These are part of the analog octave up circuit, which is basically a green ringer. The diode should be pretty closely matched in order to maximize the effect of the analog octave up. So you can't always measure diodes in circuit like this, but in this case for this circuit, it should work okay. Let's test the first diode here. All right, so we're getting a forward voltage of about 2.8 volts, 2.79 or so. Let's check the other diode here. And this diode's reading 2.81 volts. So we're within 1 millivolt of each other, which is very good matching. That's going to lend itself well to a strong and very prominent octave up effect. One thing that's nice the Earthquaker did here is they did socket the op amp for the Rat. Aside from the obvious benefits, which is swapping out op amps easily if something goes wrong or it fails, you can also experiment by swapping in other op amps. They've also gone with these sort of Molex header style connections for the foot switches. I like that again because it's simple to replace. If you have a bad foot switch, all you have to do is get one of these with a Molex header on, or even just splice in the old one, and then you can just snap it into your circuit. You don't have to get the PCB out and desolder, resolder anything, especially since this PCB is really wedged in there. Solder job wise, I would say it looks pretty good, especially the surface mount components here are all very evenly soldered. That's nice. Just a little bit of a stickler thing. Some of the resistors aren't fully flush to the PCB. Like this resistor here is sticking up a little bit. You can see that this germanium transistor is not fully flush with the board. Some of these other resistors here are a little off kilter. It's not a huge deal. You could even argue that, you know, you might do that for some allowing the resistor to flex a bit under heat. However, if your guitar pedals are getting hot enough that your resistors need to be able to flex under heat, then you probably have other issues. So that's just one tiny little gripe. Otherwise, the solder job looks really good. So since Earthquaker was smart enough to put in a socket for the op amp for the Rat, I've decided with this pedal I'm going to include a PMI OP07. This is a vintage chip from the company PMI. If you're not familiar with them, they actually invented the OP07. You can see the date code there. This is 1985, 33rd week. So I am going to include this with the pedal. Don't forget, all the pedals I do on the Teardown series are available for sale. If you check the description of the video and you want to support the channel, you will find this pedal for sale, now including this replacement vintage OP07 chip that you can try and experiment and see how you like the sound on this Earthquaker life pedal. All right, so pretty simple one today, not much more to say. Pretty simple, just 3 pedal circuits strung into one. Let's go ahead and put the pedal back together. Okay, so that wraps up the teardown on the Earthquaker Life Pedal version 2. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you have a recommendation for a pedal that you want to see taken apart, feel free to let me know. As always, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate you hitting the like button and subscribing. Hit the notification bell if you want to know when I make a new video. Also, if you want to own this pedal right here and you want to support the channel, there will be a link for a reverb listing on this exact pedal in the description. I'm Joe from Gray Bench Electronics. Thank you for watching.